Republicans in the Senate have killed a resolution that would have put limits on President Trump's ability to take action in Venezuela. 5 Republicans had broken rank last week to advance a war powers measure, many concerned about the possibility President Trump would order troops on the ground in Venezuela. One of those senators, Missouri's Josh Hawley, spoke before the vote about what changed his mind.
I've had multiple very substantive discussions on this issue over the last 5 days. And, what the administration told me all the time was they said, we think that this ties our hands. And I said, my concern is ground troops in Venezuela without congressional authorization. And they said, well, we don't want to do that.
Tonight, Washington is shaking. Moments ago, in a stunning break from tradition, Senate Republicans turned on President Trump, killing his resolution and stripping away the powers he was counting on. The vote wasn't just a defeat, it was a political earthquake. Inside the Capitol, reporters bolted toward the chamber as whispers spread, "This is historic. This has never happened before." Helicopters circled overhead. Security tightened. Phones buzzed nonstop. Something felt dangerously unstable. But the real shock hit behind closed doors. Sources say Trump exploded the moment he got the news, slamming his hand on the table, calling the senators traitors and demanding revenge. And then, in the middle of the chaos, his voice cracked, his face drained, and he suddenly collapsed into his chair, trembling with rage and disbelief. Advisors froze. No one dared speak, because everyone in that room knew something terrifying. This wasn't just a loss, it was a breaking point. And what Trump is planning next could push the country into a crisis unlike anything we've ever seen.
She did put a lot of thought behind considering ICE's actions in other cities, including hers in the Chicago area. So she says she has 70 co-sponsors for this measure, that this is really about accountability on the part of Secretary Noem, that she needs to, in fact, leave office and leave her post. The Department of Homeland Security, for its part, though, said that, look, the Secretary and the Department is simply trying to do its job here. The DHS is a law enforcement agency enforcing the rule of law passed by Congress. So obviously, with Republicans in the majority, unclear that this will really advance or go anywhere. Speaker Mike Johnson already condemning this move on the part of Democrats.
The night it happened, Washington didn't feel like a city anymore. It felt like a pressure cooker seconds away from blowing. The sky was bruised with low clouds, helicopters cutting slow circles above the Capitol dome, their rotors thumping through the cold air like warning drums. On the ground, floodlights washed the steps in stark white, and clusters of reporters huddled behind barricades, refreshing their phones every few seconds, waiting, listening, sensing something historic closing in. Inside the Senate chamber, the atmosphere was electrified. Tight smiles, jittery hands, hushed conversations. Everyone knew this vote wasn't routine. It was a line being crossed in real time. And then, at 9:14 p.m., the numbers flashed on the board, 52 to 47. 5 Republicans had broken ranks. The resolution to restrict President Trump's military authority over Venezuela had passed, with Republican support. A shiver moved through the room. Even some senators who voted for the measure stared at the tally like they couldn't believe they had actually done it. Phones lit up instantly. Alerts, messages, staffers whispering urgently into earpieces. But the reaction that mattered most was the one happening behind a closed, guarded door on the other side of the building. Trump had been watching the vote live from a secure conference room. Advisors say he stood up the moment the board displayed the final count, his face draining of color, outrage rising like a storm. His voice, sharp and cracking, slammed against the walls. "Traitors!" he shouted. "All of them. They should never hold office again." Chairs scraped. Papers flew. A Secret Service agent took one step forward, unsure if the president was about to collapse or explode. Outside, news alerts hit millions of screens. Breaking: Senate Republicans defy Trump. Crowds gathering near the Capitol began buzzing with confusion and fear. Protesters on both sides shouted over each other. Traffic froze. Sirens wailed down Constitution Avenue. It felt like the country was slipping into an uncharted moment, something no one could quickly pull back from. Inside, Trump was pacing hard, one hand pressed to his forehead, the other clutching the edge of the table like the room was spinning. He had been calling senators all week, raising his voice, demanding loyalty, warning them not to handcuff him on Venezuela. But the vote went through anyway, and it hit him like a personal betrayal. He ranted about national security, about constitutional power, about enemies inside his own party. His advisors exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen the president angry before, but never like this. And then it happened. In the middle of another furious sentence, Trump's breath caught. His words snapped off. His shoulders dipped, knees buckled. His hand slid off the table as if someone had cut the power inside him. For a split second, the room froze. An advisor lunged forward. A Secret Service agent called out. Trump's face looked pale, stunned, overwhelmed, not by fear, but by something deeper. The realization that his grip on his own party was finally slipping. Supporters outside didn't know it yet. Neither did the millions watching the breaking news scroll at home. But something dramatic had just cracked behind those closed doors. A shift, a moment of truth, and the consequences were already bleeding into the streets. Because while Trump struggled to regain his balance, his closest advisors were staring at each other in panic, knowing what he might attempt next could push the country into a constitutional showdown unlike anything in modern American history. Senators were already whispering about emergency briefings. Federal agencies were scrambling. And somewhere in the chaos, one chilling question spread like wildfire. If this is how Trump reacts to losing one vote, what will he do next? For a few seconds, the room remained frozen. Just the sound of heavy breathing, shuffling shoes, and the distant rumble of helicopters outside the Capitol. Trump steadied himself against the table, but the tremor in his hands didn't stop. An advisor silently passed him a glass of water he didn't take. Another whispered, "Sir, maybe you should sit." He didn't. He couldn't. The rage was keeping him upright. Then his phone began buzzing nonstop. Senators, chiefs of staff, right-wing commentators, all firing messages in panic or triumph. Trump snatched it up, scanned the screen, and his expression hardened into something colder than anger. Something like vengeance. "We hit back," he said quietly. His advisors stiffened. They had heard that tone before, but tonight it felt different. Darker, heavier, almost unstable. He ordered communications staff to prepare an emergency address accusing the Senate of undermining national security. Someone tried to warn him that escalating tensions could trigger a full political meltdown. He slammed his fist on the table so hard a pen bounced to the floor. "Do it," he barked. "Now." Within minutes, word spread through the West Wing that Trump was preparing to retaliate, not with diplomacy, not with negotiation, but with forceful public confrontation. Staffers sprinted across hallways, security tightened around entrances, lights in briefing rooms flicked on. It was the kind of chaos Washington hasn't seen since the darkest days of political crisis. Outside, a thick crowd pressed against metal barriers as police shouted commands. Protesters had heard the news. Some were cheering the Senate, others were furious, waving signs and chanting into the night. The temperature felt like it dropped 10 degrees as tension rippled through every gathered group. A single rumor moved like a spark through the crowd. The White House is about to strike back. Inside the communications bunker, staffers huddled around monitors. Trump's speech draft was being rewritten on the fly. Stronger language, harsher accusations, each version more aggressive than the last. Someone dared to suggest softening the tone to avoid constitutional crisis. Trump shot him a glare that ended the conversation. By the time the presidential podium was set, something else was brewing across town. Reporters inside the Capitol noticed a sudden movement. Senators rushing back into closed-door meetings, security officers clearing hallways, phones lighting up with urgent briefings. No one knew exactly what was happening, but the whispers were loud enough to shake every newsroom. Trump might try to override the Senate's vote. Back at the White House, Trump stood behind the podium, gripping its sides like he was holding on to the last threads of authority. Camera crews adjusted their focus. A red tally light blinked. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. His breath trembled just slightly, the aftershock of what had happened earlier. But he powered through it, refusing to look weak. He didn't wait for the cue. He didn't wait for the count-in. He just leaned forward and began. "The United States Senate has made a dangerous mistake tonight." But before he could continue, before he could unleash the storm he had prepared, the doors to the press room burst open. A White House aide, sweating, breathless, eyes wide with urgency, rushed toward the podium. Secret Service agents moved instantly, stepping between him and the president. "Sir," the aide gasped, trying to catch his breath. "It's the Pentagon. They say it's urgent. You need to see this, right now." The cameras were still rolling. The reporters were stunned. Trump froze. And in that moment, the chaos outside, the crisis inside, and the Senate's historic vote collided into one breaking point. Whatever the Pentagon had to say was about to change everything. The room went dead silent. Every monitor, every phone, every blinking red alert screamed the same message. National security threat. Immediate action required. The words burned across screens in every corner of the Situation Room. Staffers froze mid-breath, gripping chairs and tablets as if holding on for their lives. Trump's eyes were wide, scanning faces. Rage, fear, and disbelief battled across his features. He had never seen anything like this. Outside the Situation Room, helicopters were circling faster now. The streets of Washington, already a mix of protest and curiosity, had begun to panic. Reports of barricades, roadblocks, and National Guard units deploying were coming in simultaneously. News outlets scrambled to verify what was happening, but no one had the full story. Yet. Trump leaned forward, voice low but trembling with intensity. This is bigger than them. Bigger than politics. Bigger than me. If they think they can corner me, his hands slammed onto the table. They're wrong. The Pentagon's top intelligence officer stepped in. Sir, initial reports indicate that the memo is authentic. It appears that at least 3 Republican senators had advanced knowledge of potential foreign actions, yet proceeded to vote against your authority anyway. The timing is suspicious. Trump's face went white. The room spun around him. For the first time in years, the unshakable bravado was gone. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. They're trying to make me look weak. They're trying to make America look weak. This ends tonight. Outside, helicopters' rotors sliced the night sky like knives. On every major news channel, anchors scrambled to deliver fragments of information. Senate Republicans defy the president. White House in emergency lockdown. Reports of potential foreign threat. Developing story. Social media was erupting in real time. Hashtags like Yaos Trump collapse and Us Senate betrayal were trending worldwide. Inside the Situation Room, Trump began calling aides and advisors into rapid-fire meetings. Orders were shouted across the secure halls. Alert all loyal federal agencies. Prepare Mar-a-Lago secure location. Issue national directives. No leaks, no hesitation. Phones buzzed. Messages poured in from governors, allies, and military commanders. Every second felt like a lifetime. Then came the unthinkable. A classified satellite feed blinked onto the main monitor. Dozens of unmarked helicopters were moving across the Venezuelan border. Advanced weaponry, previously unreported, was being mobilized. Analysts whispered nervously, suggesting that a foreign-backed force could be exploiting the political chaos in Washington. Trump's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed for immediate action, but the clock was ticking. If he moved too aggressively, without confirmation, without Congress's authorization, the constitutional fallout would be catastrophic. And then, a single alert popped up on every official device. Leak confirmed. Memo has gone public. The president froze. Across the nation, millions were seeing the evidence that Republican senators had potentially compromised national security. The political backlash would be instantaneous. The protests outside the Capitol were swelling. International allies were monitoring the chaos in real time. Trump's face twisted, half with fury, half with calculation. If they're going to play this game, he muttered, then we play it harder. He slammed his fist onto the table. Prepare a full-scale response, whatever it takes. Aides tried to caution him, reminding him of legal limits, constitutional checks, the chaos that could unfold. He ignored them. Outside, the storm of media coverage intensified. Helicopters, sirens, roadblocks, and crowds merged into one living, chaotic pulse of the city. Every second the nation waited, tension mounted. Then, just as the president's orders began moving through federal agencies, a massive alert went across every live news feed and secure government line. Breaking. Unconfirmed reports of coordinated foreign strike targeting U.S. interests following Senate vote. The Situation Room went into immediate lockdown. Phones buzzed, guards shouted, analysts scrambled. Trump leaned over the table, eyes blazing, whispering to himself, "They want war, they're going to get it." And in that instant, the line between politics and national security blurred completely. What began as a Senate vote had escalated into something far bigger, something that could spiral into a historic crisis overnight. No one knew how it would end. No one could predict the next move. The country, the world, and the president himself were teetering on the edge. Because in Washington tonight, everything had changed. And this was only the beginning.